INNOCN has completely ruined me. This is the INNOCN 48Q1V. It's OLED, it's 4K, it's 48 inches, and get this, it's a monitor. It's not a TV, and it's 138 Hz. After you look at a 4K OLED at 138 Hz playing Street Fighter 6, with 1 millisecond response time, it's pretty much impossible to go back to anything else. It's also HDR10. Hard to describe. I didn't have an OLED in the house, and I've got CRTs. And this is about as close as it gets to a CRT, and it's better when it comes to high resolution content like 4K content like you're looking at right now. I also want to give a shout out to Green Man Gaming for sending over the copy of Street Fighter 6 because it looks beautiful on this screen. And I'm also a big fan of 2D fighters. You may not know this, but I've been playing 2D fighters since the original Street Fighter 2. That was my first. And this one actually reminds me a little bit of Last Blade because there's so many counters and so many ways to like dodge and parry. So check it out. There's a link in the description, and with Green Man Gaming you can actually get it cheaper than Steam. So check out the link in the description to get a discount on Street Fighter 6. Thanks again to Green Man Gaming. Thanks to Whokeys for sponsoring this video. You can get 25% off Windows and Office with coupon code TS25. So they've got Windows 10 Pro, they've got Home, you've got Windows 11, Office 2021, 2019, and 2016. Putting in coupon code TS25, click apply, and then watch these prices come down. Wonderful. Once you're finished, all you have to do is click on your user account up here, go to your user center, click on My Purchase Orders, and then you'll see everything you've purchased right there. Just view keys and codes, and you can just copy and paste your key, hit start, type activate, click on activation settings, paste it in there, click on next, and you will be activated. If you're a home user, you're going to pay 10 times more than an OEM builder or a corporation or something like that. And that's why I like heading to places like Whokeys.com to get the OEM keys so I can pay a price that makes sense. So thanks to them for sponsoring, and now to our regularly scheduled program. Now the panel on this is an LG panel, and it's really geared towards media, HDR, and gaming with that 138 Hz refresh rate, especially when you take into account that it also has the premium version of FreeSync. Fancy FreeSync Premium. 10-bit display technology, pretty much as crazy as it gets when it comes to a panel. And I said it's ruined me because for a long time I've not had an OLED. I know that they're like the best technology, but I figured I've got my CRT televisions for emulators. And then I've got my main monitors for just doing whatever else, and they get the job done. They're really nice. But I wasn't prepared for the jump in quality between an LCD, even an IPS panel, a really nice IPS panel like my Alienware. I wasn't prepared in the jump in quality from the IPS panel over to the OLED. My other panel's HDR as well, but OLED HDR and IPS HDR are not the same thing. So if you're someone who's like me, was using an IPS for a very long time and thought it's okay, just note that as soon as you come near an OLED, it's going to ruin you. But I really like this one for a number of different reasons. So let's go through those. And the main reason I got this was because I wanted to try it with emulators. That's right, I got this huge, ridiculous, over-the-top monitor. Actually, I asked them to send me a version of it so I could check it out, but I wasn't gonna make this first video, but I like the monitor so much that I am making this first video. But the main thing I wanted to make was a video comparing this OLED to a 27-inch CRT, which is very similar in size once you figure the fact that the CRT's 4x3 and this is 16:9. I wanted to compare them when it comes to emulators to see if we could achieve CRT-like graphics, and I'll talk about that when we get to it in a second, but I'm going to make a second video later in the month on that. I'll go through a few more of the specs, and you're looking at it here on the screen playing some games and stuff. It's got this no flicker technology because a lot of times when you turn the brightness down on an OLED, you'll start to notice flicker. Now there's like 59 Hz flicker, so they say somewhere in there, like a very subtle thing, but I couldn't detect it with my eyes. I can't see any flicker. There's no flicker, so that's taken care of. It's 108 nits when you're running it standard. If you're running an HDR, they say it can get up to 720 nits, I believe. I'm not really sure how the nits work when it comes to HDR because I am not a nitwit. So like I said, you get your FreeSync Premium. When it comes to color reproduction, you have 100% of the sRGB spectrum, 98.5% of the DCI P3 spectrum. But you need to make sure you go in and turn on the HDR in the menus. So just make sure when you're first getting this, go into the menu, turn on HDR, and then you're going to be good to go. Now, OLED also has pretty much the best viewing angles. You can see it from almost the side, like beyond anything I've ever seen. It looks really good at all the viewing angles. So this LG panel is really, really awesome. Now it's 48 inches, and the size is something that I think we need to talk about because this is a monitor. It's not a television. There's no smart features. And I saw some people on the internet saying, no smart features. And then I looked at it and I was like, oh, no smart features. This is amazing. I really want something that's like this that I can use for all my media, and I don't want any of that smart nonsense. I don't want the smart monitoring. I don't want a camera watching what I'm doing all the time. I don't want microphones listening to me. I don't want advertisements to be served to me. I don't want apps. I don't want the TV to be able to brick itself and say like, oh, you can't use your television until you connect to the internet and download 17 updates. I don't want any of that, and that's why I love the fact that this is just a monitor. In other words, it's a dumb device. It's got some really smart things going, but there's no nonsense. If you want it to be smart, sure, you can plug up a Chrome stick thing or whatever you kids are doing these days. I just plug it up to a computer, which is amazing. And then I can run Jellyfin and watch all my shows, and they look amazing. Just make sure that when you're using your OS, whether it's Linux or Windows or whatever, Mac, go in and make sure HDR is turned on for that monitor. You have to do this in Windows. You have to go put a check mark, go into your properties, and enable HDR. Your screen's going to turn black for like 10 seconds, and then it'll come back on, and you'll be all good to go. So we'll talk about how beautiful it is in a minute. I'm going to keep talking about the unit. We'll talk about the structure, the aesthetics, and everything else next. So it's ridiculously thin at the top. You notice on the side there's some ambiance. They've got some RGB lights just to make things cool. I don't know, brighten up the room a little bit, give you some backlighting, which is nice. You can turn that off if you want. Now the base you'll also notice has in the bottom where all the electronics are housed, we have a little bit of a fan grill at the top, or just a heat dissipation grill at the top. And then a nice area just for all the electronics and whatever else is going on the inside. Also, the power, there's no power brick. It's all internal, so you just have to plug up a 3-prong like one of the Mickey Mouse plugs to the back and then plug it into the wall. So you'll never have to worry about losing a power brick. You'll never have to worry about any of that. But putting it into the monitor means you can just use any cable off the shelf for a few dollars. So that's awesome. A hole in the middle, and that's for routing your cables. This thing's going to pull well under 100 watts, usually 50 to 60 watts if it's running at like half brightness. All right, so you can see there it's a 48-inch monitor, but it's actually a little bit taller. And that area on the bottom with the really sleek fabric, oh, it's really sleek, isn't it? And it's got the nice understated INNOCN logo. Now that area is where we have the speakers. And that's kind of weird. Like, speakers on a monitor, the sound is really good. Like, it sounds better than most television sets, even though it's a monitor. But it's a 2.1 speaker setup. You have 2 mids on the side and then a subwoofer or a little bass speaker. So it has, okay, this sounds pretty good for a monitor, but it's still monitor and I'm not going to use it, and I don't know why anybody else would. So I would rather it not have it, but it also makes the thing look pretty sleek, and I don't mind it being a little higher. I like my monitors high enough that I can like look at them straight on. So it's not really a big deal, and I like the look. It makes it very sleek and almost professional looking, but that's subjective. If you don't like it, then that's your thing. But if you love it, then, you know, whatever. So yeah, now let's turn around and look at the back. We have 3 HDMI, DisplayPort, and USB-C. And these are all special things because all of those ports, the DisplayPort and the 3 HDMI, they can all do the 138 Hertz. All of them at 4K. So we got some premium stuff there. They didn't skimp out on any of the ports. And you can split up your screen and do like half screen with one source and half screen with another source. You can easily do that in the menus and just set that up and then say which audio source do you want to use. So you can watch a movie from one device on one screen, do some work on the other screen. And if you had like a laptop or something, you can have dual screen with half while the other half's watching a movie. And if you look at the bottom left, there are some physical buttons. It's really hard to get video of this, so yeah, there are some physical buttons as well as a remote. Now, as long as your laptop supports it, like I know the MacBooks do, you can plug this up with USB-C. It'll completely keep the Mac charged at the same time as you're sending the video signal from the Mac or the laptop to the OLED monitor. And you won't have to have any extra cables. That's it, just the one cable and you're good to go. Now, the metal base is really sturdy. This is a pretty heavy unit. It's a nice substantial weight. I would recommend having someone else help you while you're like holding it up or flipping it upside down like I did to screw the stand on. There's just 4 screws on the bottom, and those are the same screws that you'll need if you want to not use the stand, which is an option. They've included a VESA mount. It's a 200mm VESA mount, so you can install that with those same screws that you could use for the base. So, or you could just do like I do and get some thumb screws. I know any like VESA compatible thumb screws are great. Put those on the back. Now, if you want to have like maximum versatility on how to move this around, you'll need to use the Visa mount, but otherwise you do have 5 degrees of motion, I believe it's up, and then 10 degrees of motion down. When it comes to tilting on the stand, there's no swivel, there's no pivot, no swivot or pivel. Yes, none of those things are included. But why would you want to pivot this thing? It's ridiculously huge. All right, now we've got all that out of the way. I'm going to talk about just the quality of this. I was kind of blown away at how good HDR looks on this. I know it looks good. But once you have like a good HDR movie and you turn it on and you see how awesome the dark areas look like, watch something like Blade Runner, where you have some scenes that are super dark, but you can see all of the gradations. I guess that's why it's called high dynamic range, because you have a lot of dynamic range there. Like there'll be like a really strong light source and some dark shadows, and you'll be able to see all the details in both. So that's pretty handy. Now the 138 hertz thing was what I was really interested in, because 4K at 138 hertz is enough for like really high-speed gaming, and the gray to gray on an OLED is way faster than an IPS. It's not quite in CRT territory, but we're getting there. And also, the thing that produces the super smooth motion and the depth on a CRT, once these get fast enough and are able to insert black frames in between and do all those kinds of crazy things, OLED may start to get as good as CRT, but it's still not quite there, I don't think. You know, I looked at some and then I looked back and forth. But the beautiful thing about a big 4K set like this, you can run this with some CRT filters in RetroArch for the old games, and having this many pixels means you can really simulate the effect of a CRT, and it looks pretty good. So we'll do another video side by side where I start to talk about the benefits of having one over the other. You know, the bottom line is really, if you have a lot of space, then have everything, but you know, or a lot of money, have everything, but not everybody has a lot of money and a lot of space. So we'll talk about that in the video, just comparing OLED to the CRT, and specifically with mostly old games and CRTs. But it does look really good, especially when you turn on the CRT effects and you simulate the bezel. It starts to feel like, yeah, I'm playing this on an old school set. So if I didn't have a lot of room, this might just do the trick, because it is really fast, and the motion does feel good enough, and I can relive a lot of the old games and play a lot of the old games that I missed with the emulators and the CRT filters, and it's pretty awesome. I would recommend, if you're going into the menus on RetroArch, look under bezel when it comes to shader. Don't look under CRT or whatever. Look under bezel. There's something called mega bezel, but we can get into that. There's a bunch more that we can play with, but yeah, get into that and dive under the hood. Now, when it comes to the picture quality, you know, there's a couple different ways to do the OLED. You can have RGB LEDs under the hood, or you can also have RGBW, which is a white LED that makes it brighter. And I really can't see how the picture can be any better than this. A lot of people say that the white LED is just there to make it brighter, and it doesn't necessarily improve the picture quality. In fact, people say that it can make the text and fine details look a little worse, but it's such a good LG panel that I mean, maybe it could be better at some point in time, but it's so much better than my IPS that it's like, yeah, it's just awesome. Now, it comes out of the box in sRGB mode, but you can change it from several different modes, put it in DCI mode, and just see which one you like the best, which color space you like the best. You can go in and tune it to your heart's content. And then you have different game modes you can turn on, like RTS mode or first-person shooter mode. And then also, if you wanted to go full gamer, you can turn a reticle on the screen. I'm not going to show that, but you know, a lot of these gaming monitors, for some reason, have the reticle you can turn on. If you want to be really cool while you're streaming and have no reticle, and then secretly have one on your monitor that no one can see, you liar. You can do this. You could do all that. There was nothing, I don't feel like I need to go through the menu. There's nothing really shocking in there. There's just the different modes. You can turn on adaptive sync if you want to. I'll talk about that in a second. You could turn on your refresh rate on and off, which I guess turn it on to make it go the fastest. You got your picture-in-picture settings like I mentioned before. You can move the OSD around, which it's kind of a tiny OSD, not extremely quick, but it gets the job done, so I don't care. You can change your HDMI version to 2, 2.1, whatever. And then we have some settings for Eye Shield, which is just some marketing nonsense that everyone seems to love to do. They're all going to tell you like, hey, this delivers less blue light than other things, and that's great. Whatever, less blue light, that's bad for your circadian rhythms. But okay, all of this marketing stuff that's been going on with blue light, and I feel like I could make a totally separate video just talking about this one thing. There is no science at all that says that blue light exposure damages your eyes. None. There's no science. I got really curious about it because all these companies were sending me monitors and being like, hey, it's going to kill your eyes if you could, but luckily we've got this blue light removal so you can watch everything in orange, it'd be great. And that's only true at nighttime because blue light can disturb your circadian rhythm. That's it. Otherwise, whatever. So don't feel like you need to turn that on during the day because there's no science that says it does any harm. But it's there. All right, the color spaces, I'll just mention them really quick. We have standard, and I found that one looked pretty good, nice and saturated. sRGB mode probably looks the best to me, but whatever. There's Adobe mode, and that one costs $70 a month. That's a joke. Little Adobe humor. And then the DCI-P3 mode. I found that when I was watching HDR in a dark room, I needed to turn this down to like 40 or 50% with the brightness. It was just so bright. It's really, really vivid and bright. And video games look amazing on this, and I want to talk about that now. So yeah, playing Zelda on this 4K, at this, I unlocked the frame rate and everything. This is how it should be played. It looks awesome and it plays awesome. Playing a lot of these other games, like it just feels so good on this screen. And that's the next thing I want to talk about, this screen. Okay, so it's good for gaming. Now, how big's your desk? Because this is a monitor, but it's the size of a TV being 48 inches. If you put this on a desk and you sit 2 or 3 feet away, well, that's going to be great for productivity. You can fit so many menus on the screen. You can see so much of what's going on. But when it comes to 4K, we always need to talk about Windows scaling. And if you're sitting close, you can keep the scaling at 100, and things will be pretty small, but as long as you're within a couple of feet, you'll be able to see all of the words and menus and everything. But if you're sitting back a bit more, you'll have to turn the scaling up, at which point you start to sort of defeat the purpose of 4K when it comes specifically to productivity. It'll have extra fine, nice edges, but if you're really close, it's not, it's just leave it on 100%. So, yeah, that's great for productivity. Now, when you play a game, if you're still sitting that close, well, it's too close for me. I need to be sitting back almost on a couch because this thing's so big. If you're playing a first-person shooter, you're going to be like, and you're going to give yourself whiplash trying to see what's going on. As you're moving around, things are going to be, I have no accuracy whatsoever when I'm playing like a first-person shooter on something like this. So I generally just play Zelda and whatever other games I'm playing on this, arcade games and stuff. And I would sit back on the couch. But then when you get back into your Windows interface or whatever other interface, you're going to need to have the scaling turned up to like 250 or even 300 depending on how far away you are, just so you can see the buttons, the start button, the interface, the menus. But not all the programs work correctly at such ridiculous scalings. Like my menus inside RetroArch were tiny, like ridiculously tiny, even though I had the scaling turned up and down. So I was constantly like getting up and like looking at the screen. So a monitor this big is really good for certain things, but you just have to figure out what you want to do with it when it comes to switching between different tasks, switching between doing the productivity and doing gaming. I would probably put this on a monitor arm, and this is ridiculous, but I would probably pull it close, switch the scaling to 100%, do all my productivity work. And then as soon as I'm done, I'd push it back on the monitor arm another foot or two, and then play my games that way. RTS games, strategy games, maybe even MOBAs, I don't know. The third-person games maybe are not so bad when you're sitting that close. But first person is going to be really difficult if you're sitting on, like a normal size 3 or 4 foot desk. Maybe that's a big desk, or even maybe 2.5 to 3 feet desk at the most. But yeah, you'll need a big desk. So I would recommend using this more as a gaming monitor primarily, or a movie watching monitor, or as a TV replacement more than anything. When it comes to productivity, yeah, but I don't think it's going to replace my 21:9, 3840 by 1600, just because that one I can run at 100% scaling. And this one, if I put it on my desk, I can. But then, having to deal with like switching from game to not game and the interface scaling and stuff, I like to be able to run my monitors at 100% all the time, and I just can't do that with something that's, going to be this close, but also I need to be farther away. It's huge. It's so big. If you're primarily gaming and you know what you're getting yourself into, and you can put it on even hang it on a wall, put it behind your desk, put it a couple of feet away, then it's going to be amazing. If you want to use it as the best gaming television and entertainment center you've ever had with that 138 hertz refresh rate, do it. Now, the last thing I want to mention about gaming and that 138 hertz refresh rate is this does come with the FreeSync Premium, which works with pretty much everything. G-Sync and everything should be compatible with this, even though they didn't pay NVIDIA the green money to get the green sticker, but whatever. So when it comes to that, I would recommend actually keeping your adaptive sync or your FreeSync turned off and just see how it runs. See if there's any screen tearing. Because once you're running at like a really high refresh rate, by the way, make sure you go into your Windows settings and turn your refresh rate all the way up because it doesn't always default. Got to do that with HDR and your refresh rate. So anyway, while you're playing your games, if you're playing, with the refresh rate of the monitor really high, a lot of times you won't need adaptive sync, and adaptive sync can introduce some latency here and there. If it's really important to you and you're noticing screen tearing, then turn it on, but try it without it first, because you may not need it when it comes to like these high refresh rates. All right, so that pretty much concludes the first look at the INNOCN 48Q1V. Watch for this to go on sale. The price tag, it's priced for what it is. This is what I would consider a luxury monitor. This is top of the line for the best monitor it's ever been on my desk. It's a bit ridiculous. If you're not familiar with INNOCN, they're a company based in Shenzhen, China. And one of the things I like about companies that are there is that they're right in the heart of all of this manufacturing stuff. So a lot of the companies have direct access to all the factories, and they can get stuff usually at a better price. They work right there with all the stuff. They can get all the stuff. They've been around since 2014, and when you have a company that obviously knows what they're doing because they're using such high quality parts in this, the specs are right, and that LG panel is just beautiful. So, all right, that's it. Let me know what you think. It'll probably be later in the month before I can get to the video on this versus a CRT, but I'm actually really curious to see how this will stack up. And will this motion feel fluid enough? Will the blacks look good enough? Will this be able to replace the CRT? I don't know. But, we're getting there. It looks really good. So stay tuned for that video coming later in the month. We got some stuff on sale. You guys grab these things. Oh, this is on sale too. This and this. Hey, look at all these things. So you see the price here, $21.99. That's cool and all, but just put it in your cart and then watch what happens when you go to your cart. Oh my goodness, huge clearance sale. Also, we just got some more, as in I was just going through my storage unit and I found 4 or 5 more of these. So the Senpai is back in stock. Now this is more powerful than the Raspberry Pi 4, and I use it for emulation. There's a tutorial here on how to get Batacera, which is a really awesome version of RetroArch made for these small devices, how to get that installed onto this. So after you do that, just get your controller, plug it in, and play some old games. You can even plug this up to the TV that we're looking at in this video. So head over to epicpants.com, take a look at what we got, grab a few things, maybe one of these really silent, water-resistant keyboards. Who knows? All right, let's get to the video. And that's it. I'll see you next time. For the record, now that we're at the end of the video, I just found out that there is DRM included with the Street Fighter 6 game. They just added in whatever it is, the de novo or de novo, I don't know how you say it. They just added that in at the same time as they announced or showed a video of Cammy's classic outfit, and sales went up 300%. So these evil geniuses found a way to get around all the negative press. But yeah, it does have that DRM. I didn't notice any stuttering or weirdness, so there's that, and you can play offline. I was playing on offline mode while you were watching. So not a huge deal for me, but if that's something that matters to you, just know that it does have some hot, fresh DRM.